Hello and welcome to Metra Home Theater Tech Tips. Today we've added bilingual messaging, I heard, for the first time.
Yeah. Well, it's been there every day, but of course you didn't hear it. But anyways,
I have to be here for that.
Welcome to another episode of Tech Tips, Metra Home Theater Group Tech Tips. Today we have a special episode planned for us.
Well, first off, I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
We got ahead of ourselves.
Yep. So we do have a special episode for us today. It's actually brought to you by the letter V.
V?
Yep.
Why V?
The letter V is, today's episode is brought to you by the letter V for volume control. Specifically, we're going to be talking about our help me out here. This is the VS100. Wrong box. And then the VC700, if I remember correctly. There it is. Yep, VS100.
VS100.
And the VC700. So, definitely check those pieces out. Contact your sales rep for information about those pieces as well. They are, of course, our volume controls that we have available for that. So definitely check those out as well. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to get speaker level distribution. Specifically, how to go from the amplifier to the speaker and get it distributed throughout whatever facility, house, residence, outside, inside, whatever it is, from the amplifier to the speaker. Everything before the amplifier is another topic that we're going to discuss on another day.
And today's topic is specifically about dealing with 8-ohm speaker distribution, because about a month ago we did the 70-volt speaker distribution.
Yes, we did. Which was a great episode. We actually had our friends we had Jimmy from True Audio on the line, as well as...
I learned on that one as well.
Yeah, it was a great episode, and in fact, we're hoping to get them back on the air with us another
And by the way, if you have not viewed it, please go back and do so.
After this episode.
Like us.
Yep.
Subscribe to us.
Yep.
Click the little bell.
Yep.
Instagram, Facebook.
Twitter.
Yep.
Not Tweeter. Twitter. Yep.
Twitter was a store.
Twitter. Well, I mean, it's also a speaker, but hey, we're talking about today. Yeah. See.
What a segue.
Leo is asking, where are you watching from? They are watching from inside of a wiring rack. Or a closet.
Thank you.
They're in the closet wiring up a rack right now. So
are you going to come out of the closet, Leo?
So Leo. Thanks for checking in with us, man. It's great to hear from you, as always. Anybody else who's checking in with us today, of course, as always, if you have any questions, if you have any comments or anything that you have to say about what we're talking about today, leave it in the chat for us. If you're coming in after the fact, and you're watching the recorded video, leave it down in the comments below. We do check those every day. So if you have any questions or comments about anything that we talk about, or if it's something completely different, we're happy to talk about it as well. So leave all that information down in the chat and in the comments below, and we'll get to it when we can.
And today has math.
Today does have math. So we'll go ahead and kind of dive right in and talk specifically about, I don't want to get too far into the distribution systems that are like audio matrices and, with the amplifiers that are built into those. That's all before it. We really want to talk about really the basics of getting it from the amplifier to the speaker in a basic format, in a basic system.
May I have the black marker, please?
You sure can.
Okay.
There's that for you.
If you'll switch to overhead and step to the perfect 6-foot appropriate size.
Sure will, and it is all yours. Go ahead.
Okay, so when we're looking at distribution, there's a couple of things to consider. Right out of the gate, the vast majority of speakers that are in our world are going to be an 8-ohm speaker. So that's a fairly standard statement, but here's what we have to concern ourselves with. How many? What efficiency? Meaning how loud will the speaker get? 1 watt, 1 meter? So that's quantity, efficiency,
EF,
and wire length. All of that adds up to a couple of things. First off, how much amplifier do we need? Now, the reason I'm asking this question up front is because almost always we get there and we've already picked an amp out, and then we get to the job and we have to make that amp work with what we've got. And there are lots of ways to make that happen. For example, recently did a job at the beach where we had 8 speakers, 4 on each channel, of a standard, what amp was that? That's the 2-channel.
The Crown?
It was the Crown.
Yes,
amp.
it was. Yeah.
The Crown 850, I think.
Yes, it was.
Or 1200.
No, that I don't know, but I do remember it being a Crown.
Which is an 8-ohm amp. Mm-hmm. Very stable amp, and I actually really like those for exterior applications.
I really like the Crowns. Yeah, they're good.
But how are you going to get 8 speakers to work safely, 4 on each side, on an 8 ohm amplifier when all the speakers are 8 ohms? Now the next thing to remember is in this particular case we were using the stealth speakers.
Yep.
So efficiency is a little low.
Right.
They don't get loud. You have to give up something to give that stealth hermetically sealed, we're not going to rust, rot, or deteriorate environment.
Yeah.
And the wire length in this case was approximately 150 feet of 14 gauge.
Right.
Now at 150 feet, 14 gauge is plenty of wire, so you don't have to worry about it. 18 gauge?
You start having to worry about it. Yeah. Yeah.
At least have 18.4.
Yeah.
16 is
16 is kind of like that sweet spot for me. When I was doing installations, 16 gauge was kind of the go-to for most applications. If I was worried about distance, I'd go up from there to like a 14 or a 12. And then if I was going super short and I need something extra flexible, I would go down to an 18 for that. But in most cases, it was 16.
Typically for me, it was a 16.4, and if I was going anywhere from 75 up to 150, I just doubled up the conductors.
Right. Yeah, that way you give
Which solved
yourself...
the problem, and I only had to carry 1 skew.
Right. Yeah.
So in this case, what I did to maintain an 8 ohm balance, because I didn't have a place to put any sort of autoformers to do that for me, and autoformers eat up a lot of efficiency on your system.
Right.
Now, one of the things you have to worry about is efficiency and how much current. And people tend to think of watts. It's all about watts.
Right.
It really isn't.
No.
Watts is just kind of the fuel. The question is how much octane's in that fuel, and that's your current. The higher the current, in this case, I had a Crown amp, so there's plenty of current available.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely has the Crown amp. Again, it's one of my favorites to work with, even their 70-volt system.
And by the way, we're not sponsored by Crown.
No, but we just like them a lot. Again, today we're not talking so much about 70-volt. We had that episode already, which, again, go back and check that video out after this one. Great information from True Audio as we talked about that stuff as well. But we do like them for even the 8 ohm setups for that as well. So, one of the things, where do you want to go with this? Do you want
Well, we're talking about doing a basic setup, maintaining the 4 things, impedance, efficiency, wire length, and I hate getting old.
Almost there. Efficiency.
Efficiency, impedance,
wire
length.
That's all right.
I
Keep going. Keep going.
Out.
Let's go. Keep going.
Okay, so what we're going to do here, and here's how I handle this situation, because I have to maintain correct current to all 4 speakers on each channel. Now, anybody that came from the car audio world knows that seriesing helps you with impedance. Every time you series a speaker, you double the impedance. So if you have an 8 ohm speaker and you series it with another 8 ohm speaker, you have 16 ohms. On the other hand, if you parallel it, this is series. If you parallel it, you have 8 and 8. It equals 4. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Seriesing allows you to add more speakers while maintaining correct impedance. Parallel gives you lower speakers, lower impedance, but correct timing. Now what this means is when we are seriesing a speaker with another speaker, the next speaker in line will be 40 degrees out of phase with the prior speaker.
So this is something that I actually didn't know. Oh my goodness, my phone's going off. This is something that I didn't know myself. This was something that you actually taught me with this. When you are dealing with the running speakers in series, it is changing its phasing. That was something that was actually new to me that I had never dealt with in the past. So with that, it's something very important. Yeah.
Every time when you start to have off phasing, you reduce bass.
Right.
Now, that obviously when you're doing speakers, you want to get as much bass out of them as you can. In this case, it was an outdoor application, so there's not going to be a ton of bass to start with without adding a subwoofer.
Right.
Which, if you can get away with in your neighborhood, is always a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it just flushes out the sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
40 degrees is not 40%. The thing to remember is we're looking at a 360 degree clock. So 0, 180, 95, 270. 270.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're about really 25%
right
out of phase. Oh, excuse me, 15%. 12.5% out of phase.
12.5%. There you go.
So it's not going to be a killer. It's not like you're 90 or 180 out of phase.
Right.
But if you have multiple speakers in series, each one is 40, 40, 40, 40, and can quickly get you completely out of where you need to be for good sound.
Now, that's running speakers in series.
Yes.
If you run them in parallel, does it reverse that?
No.
No. So it just
Zero.
maintains it.
The advantage of running parallel is you maintain a zero status for phasing. It's all the same phasing.
Right.
The drawback with that is you reduce the impedance. Now, people tend to think of amplifiers as pushing devices. They are not.
No, they're not.
An amplifier has X amount of capability. The speakers draw on that based on the gain adjustment.
That's why when you have the speakers, when you're putting them in there, that's why the impedance is so important, because it's actually the amount of resistance the speakers are creating, and then they create the draw at that point. So if you are adding in speakers and you're putting them all in parallel, you keep lowering and lowering and lowering that impedance until finally that amplifier is being drawn on too much.
And will cook itself.
Exactly, it'll cook it. Now, the reverse of that can also happen, where if you're running speakers in series and then continuously in series, you are increasing the resistance up to a point where the amplifier is trying to give out, or it's being drawn on by maybe that, the speaker's there, but it's creating too much of a resistance on the line.
I can honestly say I have never seen an application where the impedance was too high.
Right.
Typically the high, and that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, I've just never seen it.
No.
The higher the impedance, the more stable the amplifier is, because it's back pressure, and it likes back pressure.
Sure.
When you look at impedance, it's more like the valve on a spigot, on a faucet.
Right.
When the valve's all the way off, it's a brake.
Yep.
When you turn that valve up, what you're doing is removing the brake. It's a floodgate. And you reach a point where the valve, there's no longer a smooth control. The water's not coming down like this. The water's going everywhere.
Right.
And that's when you run into distortion and overdriving. Let's be honest, guys. By this time in the industry, you should know that tweeters don't get fried from too much power. They all die from too little.
Right.
Because at that point, you're into distortion, and it's kicking into sine wave, and that's what's killing the speaker.
Yeah. Yeah. So and of course, that's actually a really great topic to talk about with that, because when you have, it's not so much when a speaker is going to want a nice even wave. And so what happens with a nice wave is that, of course, it's cresting and falling and cresting and falling. You've got the valleys and the hilltops. Now, if you get to a plateau at any point of those, that means you are now pushing and holding that speaker cone at that position. And when you're holding something at that position, all you're doing is just putting heat into the system. And so when you have that and it's holding at that point, now, if you do it once, you might be okay. Do it twice, still going to be okay. But if you keep doing that over and over and over again, it's the toaster idea, right? You put a piece of bread in the toaster. If you push it down for a second, bring it back up, still bread. But if you keep doing that over and over again, eventually it's going to come up as toast. And we don't want to do that. Or charcoal. And you don't want to do that to your speakers.
The thing to remember, a speaker is a motor.
Right.
And you don't want to overdrive any motor. So you want to stay, if a speaker is rated at 80 watts, and you have a 50-watt amp on it, because 50 watts is lower, right?
Right, of course.
But you're going to want 80 watts of sound, you're going to fry that speaker. Now, if you have an 80-watt speaker and you have a 200-watt amp,
you're
probably safe.
Yeah.
Because, and with the exception of possibly Rammstein, or Rammstein, you're probably not going to overdrive it, or Ein Straussfest.
Sure.
It's a polka thing that'll kill speakers.
Okay.
So we're going to get back to wiring, because we got to maintain current. When current drops, volume drops. So here's what we're going to do. We have 4 speakers coming off an amplifier that's rated at 8 ohms, and these are 4 8-ohm speakers. Now, there are 2 ways to do this, and Am and I both picked different ways in our prep for this.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, this was good.
I do it this way. I'll feed off left return terminal.
Now, hold on. Back up real quick, because what we are doing here, we're starting off with 4 8-ohm speakers.
Yes, going into one channel of an 8-ohm amp.
Yep, going into one channel of an 8-ohm amp, and we want to maintain 8 ohms.
8 ohms.
Okay.
That is correct.
So, to everybody who's watching the video, before you would come to the answer on this, go ahead and put your answer back down in the chat or in the comments. I think that'd be a fun way to do this. What is the correct way to maintain an 8-ohm resistance with 4 8-ohm speakers? Go ahead and put that down. What we'll do, of course, is Brent's already starting the drawing process,
and we'll
go ahead and do that. So there we go. Yeah.
See, I'm getting carried away here. So what we have is a series paralleled system to maintain approximately 8 ohms.
Right.
Not exactly, because there's lots of variances. And by the way, impedance varies depending on frequency range.
Yes.
As the frequency range varies, so does the impedance.
Yes. That's actually one of the reasons why if you were to read impedance on a system while it's playing, the impedance changes. It's not going to be the same. In fact, we used to do this in the car audio shop when a speaker would come in as a defective speaker. The subwoofer is actually the easiest one to do this with. What we would do, of course, is we would take our meter, put it on the terminals, and take the cone of the speaker and actually
move it.
push it in and out. And if it's changing, then most of the time it's good, especially if it's in that one position, it's good. But what was interesting is that if you were finding a burn mark on the coil, if you were pushing it in and out and you got to that burn mark, you would actually see the resistance change and it would short out. So that's actually a nice way to test your speakers as well.
So what we've done here is we now have 16 and 16 because we seriesed them.
Yep.
But back at the amplifier,
Yep.
or at a connecting block, a NEMA case,
Yep.
we have 8 ohms. Now, he did it in an entirely different way, but achieved the exact same results.
Yeah. So it's basically the same process, but what I'm going to be doing, of course, is I'm just going to be, instead of having where you're doing series here, you could also series it after the fact. So instead, what you could do as well is you could actually parallel the speakers together first, and we're going to do this here and there like that, and our positives like that, and then you can series them together to the correct areas. So what you are doing is you are essentially at this point you are paralleling the 8s together to bring you to 4s at this level, and then you are then seriesing them, putting them in series. let's use the right terminology for that. You are putting them in series.
Are you serializing them?
You're serializing them. No, you're putting them in series to again bring them back over to an 8 ohm setup. So again, the whole point of this is really just to bring it back to an 8 ohm setup, so that the amplifier sees 8 ohms. So again, this is very basic stuff, but of course we're tech tips. We want to get the information out there for you as well. But this is something that everybody who's dealing with speakers needs to understand.
Now, and we are at this point assuming you have a multi-zone amp.
Yes.
However, let's say you don't have a multi-zone amp.
Yep.
What you have is you want to put 4, 6, 7, 8 pairs of speakers in a house, and all you have is 1 amp.
Yes.
Now, how do you handle that one, Adam?
Well, the easiest way, honestly, is to pick up something like this. Of course, this is just our speaker selector. This is a 6-zone speaker selector. It's pretty straightforward on its setup, and in fact, there you go, Brent. Go ahead and do that one. Go ahead.
Okay, that is...
Cut. There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, you're good.
Yeah, I'm stuck in the middle.
And there you go. Perfect. Okay. So what we have here, everybody, this of course is the AS-SS6. We also have a 4 speaker selector system available as well. And what this does, of course, it has your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 zones. On the back of it here, it will actually have an input on this and an output. Now, the interesting reason for this is that the input and the output are just a pass-through. So you don't have to have something selected on the front of it. So technically, this would be a 7-zone system if you had a 7th zone that was always on.
Or you could plug it into another switch after it if you have a larger
and you
facility
can continue it on from
and
there.
a good quality high current amplifier.
Now the important thing on this piece, of course, is to note that the protection switch is here and available as well. Now, Brent, what does the protection switch do?
It increases the impedance on the system.
Right.
Now, if you have a speaker selector switch, my guess is you're probably usually going to have a fair number of speakers engaged.
Yes.
When would you ever turn off that switch?
For me, never.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, and this is important because when you put this in somebody's house, I do encourage you to find a way to lock that down.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to say, well, it gets louder when I take it out. Yes, it does.
Yeah, because it's in parallel.
It will
basically
gain 3 dB,
Yep.
which is audible,
Yep.
but you're going to wind up cooking the amplifier.
Yes.
My preference would be to have no switch. However, it would not be sellable.
Right. So everyone's looking for the switch that, of course, has the button that says protection because they want to feel good because it has protection. But instead of having it baked into it, they want the switch. So we have a switch. But the nice thing, again, as Brent was saying, is that if you try to use, here's the thing, that math we just did with we did earlier with the 8 ohm speakers all in parallel, it just continuously cuts that resistance down until the point, if you had 6 pairs of speakers, I think it brings you down to something like a 2 or a 1. It's a 1
well
ohm.
below that, yes.
Yeah. So you wind up with a way too low resistance on that. So you're actually creating a system where you're going to fry the amplifier pretty quickly, in fact. So,
and the autoformer in this is capable of supporting 6 pair of 8 ohm speakers
Yep.
on an 8 ohm amplifier.
yes.
Automatically.
Yep.
Now, there's no adjustment. It doesn't auto-adapt if you've got 3 speakers or 4 pair of speakers. It's set for 6 because the assumption is
You're
we
gonna
offer
use
a
6.
4-banger and a 6-banger.
Yep.
If you bought the 6-banger, you're using all 6.
Right.
Now, what's the other option?
We have volume controls. So with the volume controls, pretty straightforward. Of course, like we were talking about before, today's episode is brought to you by the volume controls. We have the VS100, which of course is a slider, and we have the VC700, which is a rotary knob. But with the volume controls, this is actually very important because what you run into, of course, is, let's say, for instance, we're using it with our speaker selector. So we're using one zone out of that, which you can. In fact, you should, because the speaker selector doesn't have a volume control of its own, and very rarely do you have multiple zones that all can have the same volume. Usually you have different rooms. Maybe the kitchen is smaller than the dining room or vice versa. And then at that point, you want to make sure that you have the ability to select different volume controls for that space. So definitely wire the houses and the systems for that in mind.
With home runs.
Home runs and volume control locations for that, so that you can put a volume control in there to give them the ability to have that. In fact, you and I kind of have the same process with this, even when we're using a matrix, an audio matrix that has volume control built into it, like with a Control 4 or Creston or whoever you're using. I still run volume or speaker wire to a volume control location.
Possible location,
exactly.
And loop it on the stud.
Yep.
Even if I don't put a plate there,
Yep.
I know it's there because stuff happens.
Things happen. You know, the manufacturers, they go in and out, and so it's one of those things where if you go into a specific brand and that brand unfortunately decides to kick the bucket, unfortunately that person is done for unless you've given them an extra option like that. So definitely I do that as a backup. It's something for that as well. So one thing that's important, if you give me a top-down shot, what you'll notice, you hit the button again, there you go, is on this here, of course, you have an impedance selector as well. Now, the nice thing about this impedance selector means that I can put multiple pairs of speakers on one volume control. This volume control will actually handle up to 8 speakers.
Which is 4 pair.
On one of it, which is 4 pair, correct, 4 pair. So 4 pairs of speakers. So all I have to do, of course, if I have a single pair, I do it on 1X. Let's see if I can bring it a little bit closer there so you can see it. And there we go.
Now, I would like to add to that, if you're going to do that, run at least 14 gauge
Yes.
to the volume control. Do not go more than 2 pair of speakers on a volume control on 16 gauge.
Exactly. So the higher gauge would be better for that. So depending on the number of pairs of speakers you have, it's pretty straightforward with this. If you have 1 pair of speaker, it's times 1. If you have 2 pair, 3 pair, or 4 pair, you go up from there. So 2 pair, of course, is times 2. 3 pair of speakers is times 6, and 4 pair of speakers is times 8.
If you can keep it at 4 or less, please do so.
Yes.
Now, the next one he's going to hold up. The difference between it is it actually has a left and a right impedance matching. And why is that, Adam?
If you give me the top-down shot. This is not an amplifier inside and a speaker outside, or pardon me, vice versa of that. This is left and right. So what this will do is the same thing on the left side as the right side. So if you decide to run this in a mono setup, let's say for instance you have mono audio coming in, but you want to use this volume control to handle more than just the 8 speaker or the 4 pair of speakers. You just want to run 8 individual speakers on a mono setup. What you can do at that point is you can say, well, this side only has, let's say we have 7 speakers. This side only has the 4 speakers. This side has 4 speakers. We're going to put it on the times 8, but the other side has 3 speakers because we're only using 7. At that point, we put it on the times 6, and that will ensure that you have the correct amount of resistance for each side, so that this volume control can now take it and do the handling of it back to an 8 ohm setup, back to the amplifier or to your speaker selector. So you can come back in the shot now, I think. So when you are doing audio distribution, the important factors of all of this are, the most important factor out of audio distribution, of course, is to understand the resistance of the speakers at the speaker itself, or at the amplifier, pardon me.
Yes.
So you really got to do some math to figure out where you're going with that. The easiest way that I have found to do it for myself is to ensure that all the speakers that I'm using use the same resistance out of the box. So you can have an 8 ohm speaker or a 6 ohm speaker or even a 4 ohm speaker in some applications. If possible, keep them all the same so they're all 8 ohm, because the math becomes super easy at that point. So if you have two 8 ohm pairs and you wire them in parallel together, you wind up with 4 ohm. If you wire them in series, you wind up with 16 ohm. I don't have enough fingers. You wind up with 16 ohm. So, but of course you can play around with that, do the series in parallel and bring it back down to where the amplifier will be happy. The amplifier, most amplifiers that you see in a home are going to be happy at about 6 to 8 ohm resistance.
Now, a couple of things to think about. If you're trying to do this with an AVR or an older receiver instead of a dedicated amp, and you're trying to use, say, the A and the B outputs,
yes,
they are seriesed together.
Yes, they are.
So if you have a volume control on A and you don't have a volume control on B,
yep,
when you adjust the volume control on A, it will adjust the volume on B.
Correct.
Now, I'm not talking the main volume on the amp, I'm talking one of these.
Yes.
So if you're going to do that, what you've got to do is parallel both of these into the same speaker set.
Yep.
On the back of the receiver. Don't go to A and B to make it easier.
Yeah.
That will burn you. Do not load up a bunch of speakers on a zone 2 or zone 3 output on an amplifier. They're chips.
Yes.
And
yeah.
as we mentioned earlier, current is important.
Unless, of course, it's a dedicated amplifier that has dedicated amplification per channel.
Which leaves you out of the receivers.
Of course, but if you are in a built-in receiver that has the amplification,
it's their chip amps.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah. Those are really
chip
designed
amps
for
never really
rear
run
speakers.
more than a pair of speakers on a chip amp.
Right.
If you're going to do that, go buy yourself a Crown or a QSC, or if you got to cut the budget, a Samson.
Right.
Get something that's meant to handle that load.
So here's an interesting thing. Leo actually has two things for us. He says,
okay,
is it better to use stranded wire or solid wire over a long distance? Here's the truth of the matter. If it's going to come down to long distance is easier with a stranded cable because it's more flexible and there's less chance of the copper inside of it breaking because it's not a solid core. However, if you can run solid core copper, technically you would have a better signal at the other end over a longer distance. So it's a balancing act. It's a give and take on that one, as far as I understand.
This is, and it's still, to date, a major point of contention inside of the high-end audio industry.
Yes, it is.
And the three of us have had
very heated
many
debate.
discussions about it.
Uh-huh.
Stuart, myself, and Adam.
Very much so.
Stuart never shows up on camera.
No, but he's over there. Say hi, Stuart.
Because the advantage of stranded, plain and simply, is flexibility.
Yes.
In theory, the gauge is all that counts.
Yes. In theory.
In theory.
In theory.
I would pull stranded JIT for a couple of reasons. First off, it's going to be easier to terminate at the amplifier.
Yes. Yep.
And you don't have to worry. The strands just stay better because pressure squeezes them.
Yep.
Terminating solid core into these is a pain in the butt, and fitting it back into a box
yes, it is.
Is going to be hell.
Yes, it is.
Flexible, stranded wire is a lot more flexible. Now, through the years, we've heard lots of smoke and mirror stories. Well, I have 232 strands of copper in my speaker wire. I only have 50. It doesn't matter.
But what if it's different gauges inside the same speaker wire?
Don't even go there.
I'm sorry.
Don't go there. So,
do we want to start a fight in the comment section? Should we? Should we go ahead and do that?
Don't go there.
I'm kidding.
Don't go there.
I'm kidding.
I do have a very strong opinion on that one.
Yes, I know.
So, the quantity of strands is not that critical. What does matter to a minor degree is the oxygen-free quality.
Yes. Now,
the corrosion is honestly not really going to affect your audio right out of the gate. The problem is that corrosion will creep up the wire.
Yes, it will.
And it goes from being black
yep.
to being actual corrosion.
Yes.
Oxidation.
Yes.
And when that starts,
yep.
you start to get arcing in the cable.
Yep.
And it's the arcing that's the problem.
That will definitely cause problems for the audio signal itself.
Yeah.
So.
And the amplifier and the speaker and the volume control.
Yep.
It's a disease. It's a cancer.
So another question from Leo.
Okay.
By the way, Leo, thanks for the questions, man. That's really helpful. He said, well, it's not really a question. It's more of a statement from him, but it's going to lead into a question that I have that I want you to help me clarify.
Okay.
Okay. So what we do is we have, when he's saying to check and be safe, put a voltmeter on the speaker wire before connecting to an amp if you want to make sure you don't fry your amp.
Absolutely.
Yes, very much so. And
because
in fact,
screws, nails, staples.
Yep. Yep, you want to check and see that you don't have a short going through there. You want to make sure that you have an 8 ohm resistance at the speaker at that point. I know that that's where I'm going with it next, and I think I know what you were going to say. So yes, if you do not have a protected circuit in place, like the speaker selector or the volume control, use a voltmeter. Now, Brent, can you use a voltmeter to check the resistance at the amplifier if you have a speaker selector with a protected circuit or a volume control?
No, you cannot.
Why?
The numbers just don't work.
Yes.
I am not qualified to tell you why, but I want to talk about your previous statement.
Sure.
When you go to do your trim out, before you put your speakers in,
yes,
take a few minutes with your voltometer.
Yep.
Run a test and make sure you got nothing on that feed.
Yep.
Because if you're showing anything on that feed,
yep,
it will burn you.
Yes, it will. Not just burn you, burn the speakers, burn the amplifier, burn.
And it only takes a few minutes to be ahead of the game.
Yep.
Staples, the drywallers, the electricians, the plumbers, everybody that comes after you doesn't like you.
Yep. Yep. So do yourself a favor. Check those wires beforehand. All you have to do, honestly, is take your voltmeter, put it onto the continuity check.
Negative.
Put it on positive and negative at that on one end of it. If you hear a beep, or if you don't have one that beeps, if you see anything less than nothing, then
you got a problem.
You got a problem. You're going to want to snake it out and find out exactly what's going on first before you put anything like power to it.
Yeah, don't put your speaker in because, look, guys, it's possible to have a bad speaker.
Yeah.
So before you even put a speaker in, test the wires.
Yes.
Preemptive.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of electricians, we do have our electrician coming in for a show in July or August?
A couple weeks. He's going to be here in July. He'll be here in a couple weeks to do an episode with us. We're going to be doing one on grounding, which of course is a continuing problem that we are seeing. In fact, we're seeing more grounding problems now than we were before. So grounding, he's going to be here to talk about grounding problems and 110-volt problems in regards to a custom integration or custom installation with AV products. So he'll be here, and I'll have to look at the dates with that as well, but he will be here later on this month to talk about that.
Later on in July.
Later on in July, yes, correct. Pardon me, yeah, we're still in June, aren't we? So he will be here later on in July with that.
And more importantly, it's always good to make the electrician your friend.
Yes, it is. And if you don't have one on staff, or if you're not on staff with electricians already, that's a great thing to get into as well. Or if you don't have one, of course, get to know one. They're great to have as well. So that in case you need something extra for that. So with that to be said, honestly, that's pretty much the bulk of speaker distribution. Now, of course, you can, of course, look at our bulk wire. We have 14.4, we have 16.4, 16.2. Yeah, 14.4 is great. 14.2, 16.4, 16.2, and 18?
We got 18, but I would only use it for Siren.
Yeah. So check that out as well. We have direct barrier.
Now, having said that, I've actually had to use Cat 5 for a speaker wire because that's what I was left with.
Yeah, and actually that's a great thing to talk about. So certain systems out there, and actually this is a really great thing because I myself have run into this. Certain manufacturers out there have a system in place where they don't have speaker wire going back to the system. Yes, I was trying not to call names.
They're out of business. It doesn't matter.
So they have a system out there where they are running category wire from the amplifier to the volume control. Now the volume control is the amplifier, because what's happening is they're sending 70 volt or 100 volt or one of the two from the amplifier to the volume control, and then the speaker wire from the volume control, because it's actually converting it back over to an 8 ohm.
It's a Class D, it's a little Class D digital chip at the end.
Exactly, yeah. And so you actually have controls there. It's like input controls to feed back information to the amplifier to switch things around, but also has the volume control there. Now, this has messed with me a couple times at certain installations, and in some circumstances, unfortunately, you're kind of stuck with
the Cat 5.
Cat 5.
Now, when this happens, what this means is you actually need a better quality amplifier that's got higher current, because you're going to eat that current up quickly in the lower gauges. Now, is it going to sound as full as a 16 or a 14 gauge? No, it is not. But if you've got a good quality amplifier,
Yep.
you can overcome these and it will function just fine.
Yes. Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind as well. It technically, it's copper. It's there, it's available.
Yeah.
Is it going to be the best quality audio you're going to hear on the other end of it? No, but in those circumstances, it's background noise.
But
It's going to be distributed
have
audio.
a higher current amplifier that can overcome the deficiencies of gauge.
Right. So with that to be everything that we talked about there with that, that's kind of brings it to the max talk about that, unless you've got something else to add with it.
Then let's talk about next week.
So next week is going to be interesting. I thought I was going to be gone. I'm not. I will be here for next week's
You
episode.
can't get into New York, they won't let him in.
Yeah. So everybody stay safe out there. Of course, things are coming back up again, so stay safe whenever you can. Now, next Wednesday, we are doing to motion or not to motion.
And this is actually an interesting one for me because,
Yep.
you know, you primarily are the Spyclops tech support now.
Sure.
I was there at the very beginning.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
HDMI now.
Yep.
But this is something that we spend a lot of time with dealers on, is to motion or not to motion, because that determines how much time you're going to get out of the recording of your NVR.
And actually, we did talk about this on a previous episode. Again, go back and check out those videos whenever you can. They've have lots of information in them. But we did an episode on how to maximize the efficiency of your storage for these NVRs and DVRs for surveillance systems. But we realized that we needed to talk about more things that NVRs and DVRs as a whole, from even our other competitors and other manufacturers,
Rings and others,
what they're capable of and how to kind of get in there and really set those up. So that's what we're going to be talking about next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Friday is an off day because it's July 3rd and it's a federal holiday.
Yep, exactly. And then from there, of course, the week after that, we're going to be talking about our audio. We're going to be back in talking about audio. Now, what we're going to be talking about is our audio adapters and converters specifically. This is pre-amplifier. So this is before
How
the
do we
amplifier.
get that source back to the rack?
Exactly. So how do we mess with the audio inside the rack? How do we go from there to the amplifier? How do we get from our source device to the amplifier, distribute it and change it and move it around from there?
So DACs, digital to digital converters, balins, extenders.
Yep.
A lot of options here, so there's a lot to learn on this. And it's on one of the job sites we've done together, we've got 3 different versions.
Yes, we do. So with that, definitely check us out next week and the week after that. Now, as well, we are still putting a call out to action for everybody. We're looking for a list of tools that every installer needs to have, especially the new installers. We'll be doing an episode where you and I are going to be reacting to certain things that are on these lists.
And we disagree on things.
Yes, we do, in certain circumstances. So we want that, and then we're also looking for what needs to be on the truck at all times. If you leave the shop, these items must be on the truck. So we're definitely looking for that. So as always, please send that information over to us for what you think would be the most important items to have for that. You can, of course, send it over to me at adamr@metrahometheater.com, or you can send it over to Brent at brentm@metrahometheater.com.
Don't forget, we need to get 1,000 subscribers.
Yep, that's
on
what we're
YouTube.
pushing for. Yep.
So tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your wife,
Yeah.
tell your kids, tell
Yeah.
your dog.
Yeah.
Have him hit that button.
Yep, exactly. Hit that button, subscribe, give us a like if we helped you out on this video, if we gave you some good information. Hit that bell notification to let you know when we do go live or when we post any other videos as well. Definitely put those up for that. So with that said, everybody, thank you so much for checking in with us today. We look forward to seeing you next time, of course. And as always, label everything, reboot
Reboot early,
and reboot often.
often. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Have a great weekend.
We'll see you next time.